Mark loved the quiet moments by the lake. Every evening after finishing his work, he would grab his fishing rod, a small tackle box, and his favorite folding chair and head down the winding path through the neighborhood to the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun, and the gentle sounds of nature made it the perfect spot to unwind. Fishing wasn't just a hobby for Mark. It was his way to slow down and enjoy the simple pleasures of life. On this particular afternoon, Mark arrived at his usual spot by the water's edge. He set up his gear, cast his line, and settled in with a book while waiting for a nibble. The peaceful atmosphere wrapped around him like a blanket. Children's laughter from a nearby playground drifted in the distance, and the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze added to the tranquility. It was exactly what he needed. After a while, Mark felt a tap on his shoulder. Turning around, he saw a woman holding a letter. She introduced herself as a member of the neighborhood's Homeowners Association. Politely, she handed him the letter and explained that it was a notice regarding the lake. Mark unfolded the letter and read, "Dear resident, it has come to the board's attention that you are fishing in the community lake without prior approval. Please be advised that a fee is required for fishing privileges. Kindly submit the payment within 14 days to avoid further action." Mark blinked, slightly confused. He had never heard about needing permission or paying a fee to fish in the lake. It was a shared space for all residents, or so he had thought. He thanked the woman and watched as she walked away, the letter still in his hand. The notice left Mark feeling puzzled. Why had this rule been introduced? Was it new? He looked around and noticed other neighbors nearby, some walking dogs, others sitting on benches. No one seemed aware of any new fishing regulations. Determined to get to the bottom of this, Mark decided to attend the next neighborhood meeting where such topics were usually discussed. Over the next few days, Mark mentioned the letter to a few neighbors during casual chats. Some expressed surprise. Others shrugged it off, saying they hadn't been fishing lately. A couple of people mentioned hearing about stricter guidelines from the neighborhood association, but didn't know much detail. Mark made a mental note to ask more questions at the upcoming meeting. The meeting day arrived. Mark entered the small community room filled with familiar faces and a few new ones. The atmosphere was calm but purposeful. The association members began by going over routine updates, landscaping, upcoming events, and maintenance plans. Then came the topic Mark had been waiting for. Lake Use. Mark raised his hand when given the chance to speak. "I recently received a letter about needing a permit or paying a fee to fish in the lake. Could someone explain the details of this rule? I hadn't heard of it before." One of the board members nodded and explained. The association recently reviewed the use of common areas to help with maintenance costs and ensure everyone's enjoyment. Fishing is allowed, but residents now need to register and pay a small fee to help cover the upkeep of the lake and its surroundings. Mark listened carefully. The explanation made sense on the surface. Maintaining the lake surely costs money, but it still felt unexpected. He wondered how this change had been communicated, and if there might be a way to make the process easier or more transparent for residents. After the meeting, Mark approached a few board members and asked questions about the history of the lake's ownership and how these decisions were made. He learned that while the lake was part of the neighborhood's common area, certain parts of the land around it were privately owned by the association. As Mark left the building, he looked back at the peaceful lake through the window. It was still the same beautiful place, but now he understood that there were layers of rules and management he hadn't fully appreciated before. His curiosity was sparked, not just about the fishing permit, but about how the lake was governed and whether there might be alternative ways to enjoy it freely. That evening, Mark sat on his porch, the letter resting on the table beside him. The lake's gentle ripple called to him, reminding him of the simple joy it had always brought. At the same time, the unexpected letter planted a seed of possibility, a question about what it might mean to take a more active role in the place he cared about so much. Mark's curiosity had been sparked, but so had a sense of determination. The letter and the meeting had left him with more questions than answers. Why had the fishing rules changed? How was the lake actually managed? Most importantly, was there a way to keep enjoying the lake without feeling restricted? The next morning, Mark decided to do some research. He started by pulling up the Neighborhood Association's website. There, he found documents and newsletters outlining community policies, meeting minutes, and updates on maintenance projects. A section on lake management detailed efforts to keep the water clean and safe for wildlife, mentioning recent investments in landscaping and erosion control. It was clear the association took the lake seriously, but nowhere did it mention fees for fishing. Feeling the need for more detailed information, Mark reached out to a local expert, Laura, a real estate consultant he had met at a neighborhood event. Laura was knowledgeable about property management and neighborhood regulations, and Mark hoped she could shed light on the lake's ownership and management structure. They arranged to meet over coffee. Mark explained his situation, showing her the letter and the association's documents he'd found online. Laura listened attentively and nodded thoughtfully. The first thing to understand is who actually owns the lake and the land around it, she said. In some neighborhoods, lakes are community-owned, managed by the association on behalf of all residents. In others, parts of the lake or surrounding land might be privately owned or under different arrangements. Laura pulled out some property maps and legal documents on her tablet. Together, they examined the boundaries of the neighborhood and the lake. According to these records, she said, the lake itself is owned by the association, but there are parcels of land around it that belong to private owners or to the association's holding company. Mark was intrigued. So, does that mean the association can set rules for the lake? Yes, Laura replied, but those rules should be made with the residents' input and communicated clearly. Fees or permits might be part of maintenance, funding, but it's important that the process is transparent and fair. Mark nodded thoughtfully. I want to make sure whatever happens, residents can still enjoy the lake without surprises. Maybe there's a way to improve how things are handled. Laura smiled. That's a great approach. If you're interested, I can help you understand more about the neighborhood's governance and explore options. Feeling encouraged, Mark decided to attend the next association meeting again, this time armed with more questions and a clearer goal, to open a friendly dialogue about the lake's use and management. The following week, the meeting room filled again with neighbors, some chatting quietly before the session began. When the topic of the lake came up, Mark stood and addressed the group with a calm and respectful tone. I appreciate the association's efforts to maintain the lake, he began. At the same time, I think many of us would benefit from more information about how decisions are made and how we can participate. I also want to suggest exploring ways to make access easier for everyone who enjoys fishing and other activities. Several residents nodded. A few shared their own thoughts about the lake, some mentioning concerns about maintenance costs, others talking about the value of shared spaces. The board listened carefully. One member responded, "We're open to suggestions and want to keep the lake enjoyable for all. Perhaps a committee focused on lake use and communication could be formed." Mark smiled inwardly. This was the start of a conversation, the kind he hoped for. The meeting ended with a sense of cooperation and possibility later. As Mark walked home, he thought about the unexpected journey this letter had set in motion. What had started as a simple fishing trip had become an opportunity to learn more about the place he loved and to think about how he might contribute. He glanced back at the lake shimmering in the afternoon light and felt a new connection, not just to the water, but to the neighborhood as a whole. There was more to discover, and Mark was ready. The conversation at the meeting lingered in Mark's mind. The lake wasn't just a spot for fishing or relaxing, it was something bigger. A shared space with a delicate balance between enjoyment and preservation. But the recent changes had made Mark wonder if there was a way to approach things differently, perhaps more directly, that night. As he sat by his kitchen table, Mark opened his laptop and began researching. His goal was simple: Find out if it was even possible for an individual to purchase the lake or parts of the surrounding land. At first it seemed like an unusual question, but the more he dug, the more interesting details emerged. He learned that in some neighborhoods, certain common areas were held by the association, but other portions might be privately owned or even up for sale. What if the lake was not entirely off limits for purchase? Could owning the lake himself offer a fresh perspective on how it was used and cared for? The idea seemed bold, almost outlandish, but that only made it more intriguing. I jotted down a list of questions. Who owned the lake exactly? What parts of the land were available? How much would it cost? What responsibilities would ownership involve? Mark reached out to Laura again and shared his curiosity. She responded with enthusiasm, impressed by his proactive spirit. "It's worth looking into," she said. "I can help you get the official ownership records and connect you with the right contacts." Together, they visited the county's property records office, sifting through maps and deeds. They discovered the lake itself was technically owned by the neighborhood's association. But surrounding parcels, including small strips of land along the shore, were either owned by private individuals or held by a limited liability company affiliated with the association. One particular parcel caught Mark's eye. It was a sizable piece of land along the lake's western shore, owned by a private party who seemed open to selling. Mark saw a chance to acquire a meaningful portion of the lakeside, which might give him a voice in how the area was managed. Laura cautioned him gently. Purchasing land near a lake comes with responsibilities, environmental care, maintenance, and potential agreements with the neighborhood. It's not just about ownership, but stewardship. Mark welcomed the challenge. The idea of caring for the lake himself, of ensuring it remained a place for enjoyment and tranquility, was appealing. Over the next few weeks, Mark met with the current landowner, discussed terms, and worked with Laura to secure financing. The process wasn't without its hurdles. There were inspections, paperwork, and conversations with neighbors to consider. Some residents were curious about Mark's plans, while others wondered what this change might mean for the neighborhood. Mark kept his intentions clear. "I want to maintain the natural beauty of the lake and keep it accessible," he told neighbors who approached him. "This isn't about restrictions, but about care and balance." Finally, the day arrived when the purchase was complete. Mark became the owner of the lakeside parcel. While it wasn't the entire lake, it was a significant step of personal commitment to the place he loved. With ownership in hand, Mark began developing a vision for the area. He planned to improve the shoreline with native plants, create small fishing spots, and ensure that the land remained welcoming, yet protected from overuse. He also understood the importance of communication. He reached out to the neighborhood association with ideas for collaboration, hoping to build bridges rather than walls. There was a shared goal, a healthy, enjoyable lake for everyone. That evening, Mark sat on his newly acquired lakeside property. The water shimmered under the setting sun, and the air was filled with the quiet sounds of nature. For the first time, he felt a new kind of connection, a blend of responsibility and possibility. Owning a piece of the lake was more than a purchase. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where Mark could contribute directly to the place. That had brought him so much peace as he packed up his fishing gear and headed home. Mark looked forward to what lay ahead. This was just the start of a story about balance, care, and a fresh way to enjoy the lake together. The news of Mark's purchase spread quietly through the neighborhood, sparking curiosity and a variety of reactions. Some residents stopped by to ask questions, others simply observed from a distance. Mark welcomed the conversations, eager to share his vision for the lakeside land and to listen to others. Owning a piece of the lake gave Mark a new sense of purpose. He knew that with ownership came responsibility not just to the land, but to the neighborhood that had long enjoyed the water's beauty. He wanted to create a space that balanced enjoyment with preservation, where people could fish, relax, and appreciate nature. The first order of business was to improve the shoreline. Mark hired a local environmental specialist to help restore native plants along the water's edge. This effort would help prevent erosion and provide habitat for fish and birds. He also installed a few small fishing platforms designed to blend seamlessly with the natural surroundings. Word spread that Mark had made these improvements, and slowly neighbors began visiting the lakeside property again. Some brought their fishing rods, others simply came to enjoy the peaceful view. The atmosphere was friendly, with smiles and greetings exchanged as neighbors felt welcome to share the space. However, Mark also needed to establish guidelines to ensure the area remained well cared for. He decided to create a simple set of rules focused on respect for the environment and shared enjoyment. These included cad-chandler's fishing to protect fish populations, a limit on the number of boats to reduce disturbances, and a request to keep the area clean to communicate these guidelines. Mark designed a tasteful sign to be placed near the entrance to his property. The sign invited neighbors to enjoy the space mindfully, explaining the reasons behind the new measures. Mark hoped this would foster understanding and encourage cooperation at the same time. The neighborhood association continued managing the rest of the common areas around the lake, including walking paths and picnic spots. Mark kept in close contact with association leaders, sharing updates on his property and seeking opportunities for collaboration. One day, the association invited Mark to speak at a community event about his plans for the lakeside land. Mark welcomed the chance to connect directly with neighbors, answer questions, and hear their feedback. During the event, Mark spoke about the importance of stewardship, how caring for the land and water benefits everyone. He explained the improvements he had made and outlined his hopes for ongoing cooperation between his property and the neighborhood's shared spaces. The response was positive overall. Many residents appreciated Mark's thoughtful approach and the care he was showing for the lake. Some even volunteered to help with cleanup days and planting projects. Eager to contribute, yet not all feedback was easy to hear. A few residents expressed concern about access and wondered if new rules might limit their enjoyment of the lake. Mark listened carefully, acknowledging their feelings and emphasizing that his goal was to enhance, not restrict, the community's connection to the water. He promised to keep communication open and invited neighbors to reach out with any questions or ideas. Mark believed that transparency and dialogue would be key to building trust and fostering a shared sense of responsibility. As weeks turned into months, the relationship between Mark's property and the neighborhood association found a comfortable rhythm. The lake became a place of balance where nature was respected, and residents enjoyed peaceful afternoons by the water. Mark often found himself reflecting on how a simple fishing trip had led to this unexpected journey. What began as a surprise later had evolved into an opportunity to contribute meaningfully to the place he loved. Sitting on the fishing platform one evening, rod in hand, Mark watched the sun dip below the horizon. The lake shimmered softly. Alive with the sounds of birds and the gentle ripple of water, he felt a deep satisfaction, a connection not just to the lake, but to the neighborhood as a whole. The future held many possibilities, and Mark was ready to explore them, one thoughtful step at a time. With ownership of the lakeside property firmly in hand, Mark knew that simply making improvements wasn't enough. To ensure the space remained inviting and well cared for, he needed to establish clear guidelines, simple, respectful rules that encouraged responsible enjoyment. He began by reflecting on what mattered most: preserving the natural beauty of the lake, protecting wildlife, and maintaining a peaceful environment where neighbors could relax and fish without worries. One afternoon, Mark sat at his kitchen table, drafting a set of guidelines. He focused on balance and kindness, emphasizing care for the environment and respect for others. He included points like practicing cad-chandler's fishing to help sustain fish populations, limiting the number of boats to keep the water calm, asking everyone to clean up after themselves. Mark also thought about safety, reminding visitors to wear life jackets and watch their children carefully near the water. He included a gentle reminder that the area was private property and that visitors should be mindful of the spaces they used. Once he felt confident in the guidelines, Mark reached out to his neighbors and the association. He wanted to share the rules in a way that felt welcoming rather than restrictive. Together with a graphic designer friend, he created easy-toward signs with friendly language and illustrations of fishing, wildlife, and the lake itself. Mark arranged to place the signs near the entrance to his property and at popular spots along the shoreline. The signs invited neighbors to enjoy the lake while taking care of it, framing the guidelines as a way to protect something everyone loved. At first, there was a mix of reactions. Some residents appreciated the clear communication and the effort Mark had put into caring for the space. Others were curious about the changes and asked thoughtful questions about how the rules would be enforced. Mark welcomed these conversations. He saw them as an opportunity to build understanding and ensure everyone felt included. He made himself available for informal chats and encouraged neighbors to share their ideas and concerns. One evening, a small group of residents gathered at the lakeside to help Mark with a planting project along the shore. As they worked together, planting native grasses and wildflowers, they talked about their favorite memories of the lake and hopes for the future. "That's the thing," said Emily, a longtime resident. "This lake means different things to all of us, but it's clear you're trying to make it better for everyone." Mark smiled. "That's exactly right. I want this place to be a shared source of joy and calm for all of us." Over time, the guidelines became part of everyday life at the lake. Fishing enthusiasts enjoyed the peaceful platforms, knowing their catch would help sustain the fish population. Families picnicked nearby, confident that the area was clean and safe. And the shoreline began to flourish, thanks to the native plants that helped prevent erosion and supported local wildlife. Mark found satisfaction in knowing that the space was well cared for and that neighbors respected the guidelines. He still enjoyed his own fishing trips, often spotting familiar faces and sharing friendly greetings throughout it all. Mark stayed in regular contact with the neighborhood association. Together, they discussed ideas for events like community cleanup days and educational workshops about local wildlife. The spirit of cooperation grew stronger, rooted in shared respect for the lake and the neighborhood. Mark's property had become a bridge of place where neighbors could come together with a common purpose. One afternoon, as Mark sat on the fishing platform, a young boy approached with his father. The boy held a small fishing rod, eyes wide with excitement. "Can I fish here?" he asked politely. Mark smiled warmly. "Of course. Just remember to be gentle with the fish, and we'll let them grow big and strong for next time." The boy nodded, already imagining his catch. Mark felt a deep sense of contentment, knowing that the lake was more than water and land. It was a place of connection, learning, and shared memories. The journey that began with a letter and a question had blossomed into something far richer: community rooted in care, respect, and hope for the future. Despite the positive steps Mark had taken to care for his lakeside property, there remained a delicate balance to maintain. The neighborhood, while largely supportive, had diverse voices and perspectives. Some residents were cautious about the changes, wondering how the new ownership and guidelines might affect their everyday use of the lake. Mark understood that building trust was a process, not a one-time event. He believed the best way forward was through open and honest communication. To that end, he invited neighbors to a casual lakeside gathering, hoping to create a relaxed environment where people could share their thoughts and ask questions. The event was set for a warm Saturday afternoon. Mark arranged picnic tables, set up refreshments, and even invited a local wildlife expert to talk about the lake's ecosystem. A small group of neighbors showed up, some familiar faces, others newer to the community. As the afternoon unfolded, conversations flowed easily. Residents shared stories about fishing trips, family outings, and quiet moments spent watching the sunset by the water. Some expressed concerns about the new guidelines, while others offered suggestions for future improvements. One neighbor, James, spoke up. "I appreciate what you're doing, Mark, but I worry that having private ownership might make it harder for everyone to enjoy the lake like before." Mark nodded thoughtfully. "That's a valid concern, James. My hope is to keep the lake accessible and enjoyable, not to limit anyone's experience. I want us all to find a way to share this beautiful place responsibly." The wildlife expert added, "Healthy ecosystems depend on thoughtful care and balanced use. When landowners and community members work together, it benefits the lake and everyone who enjoys it." The conversations continued late into the afternoon, marked by a spirit of collaboration and respect. Mark listened carefully, taking notes and asking questions to better understand his neighbors' perspectives, encouraged by the turnout and the honest dialogue. Mark proposed forming a small advisory group made up of residents and himself to meet regularly and discuss the lake's management. The group's goal would be to ensure the lake remained a welcoming and sustainable place for all. Several neighbors volunteered enthusiastically, eager to be part of a shared effort. The advisory group's first meeting was scheduled for the following week. At the meeting, the group reviewed current guidelines and shared ideas for enhancements. They discussed ways to balance recreational use with environmental protection, exploring activities like birdwatching, nature walks, and community fishing events. Emily, a longtime neighborhood resident, suggested maybe we can organize seasonal events that bring everyone together, like a summer picnic or a fall cleanup day. It could help strengthen our connection to the lake. Mark agreed. "That's a wonderful idea. Events like that can build community and remind us all why this place is special." The advisory group also talked about communication. Mark offered to create a monthly newsletter to keep residents informed about lake projects, events, and any updates to guidelines. The group felt this would help keep everyone involved and reduce misunderstandings. Over the next few months, the advisory group worked together on various projects. They organized a community cleanup day that brought out dozens of neighbors who helped clear debris and plant flowers along the shoreline. Mark provided tools and refreshments, grateful for the collective effort. They also planned a family fishing day, encouraging responsible fishing practices and offering lessons for beginners. The event was a hit, filled with laughter and shared enthusiasm as trust grew. So did the sense of ownership among residents, not just of the land, but of the lake's future. Mark noticed that neighbors who had once been hesitant were now among the most active participants. One evening, Mark received a message from James, the neighbor who had voiced concerns months earlier. "Thanks for inviting me to be part of this," James wrote. "I feel like we're truly working together now. It's great to see the lake thriving and the community coming closer." Mark smiled, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. What had started as a personal quest to understand a letter about fishing had blossomed into a shared journey of stewardship and friendship. The lake was no longer just a body of water. It had become a symbol of collaboration, respect, and the power of finding common ground. As Mark looked out over the water one quiet evening, he felt hopeful. Together, the neighborhood was shaping a future where the lake would remain a cherished place for generations to come. As the months passed, Mark's role as a steward of the lakeside property evolved in ways he hadn't initially imagined. What began as a personal endeavor to protect and enjoy the lake grew into a broader community movement that embraced stewardship, education, and connection. The advisory group, now thriving, proposed new initiatives that encouraged neighbors to deepen their relationship with the natural environment. Mark was excited to support these efforts and often found himself energized by the creativity and enthusiasm around him. One idea that caught Mark's attention was to establish an annual lake festival, a day dedicated to celebrating the beauty of the lake, promoting conservation, and fostering neighborly connections. The event would include activities like guided nature walks, fishing contests, birdwatching sessions, and workshops on sustainable gardening. Mark volunteered to help organize the festival, reaching out to local businesses, environmental groups, and artists to contribute. He saw it as a unique opportunity to bring the neighborhood together, while highlighting the importance of caring for their shared natural treasure. As preparations took shape, word spread quickly. Families, seniors, and young adults alike expressed interest, eager to participate in a day of fun and learning. Mark was particularly touched by the involvement of children whose excitement about nature reminded him of his own childhood adventures. On the day of the festival, the lakeside buzzed with activity. Colorful booths lined the shore showcasing local crafts, educational displays, and delicious food. The air was filled with laughter and the gentle sounds of live music. Mark wandered through the crowds, greeting neighbors and soaking in the vibrant energy. He watched as a group of children carefully released small fish back into the lake during a catch-and-release demonstration, their faces alight with wonder. The festival's highlight was a storytelling session led by an elder from the community, who shared tales about the lake's history and its role in shaping the neighborhood. Mark listened closely, gaining a deeper appreciation for the place he had grown to love even more. Inspired by the festival's success, the advisory group decided to create an educational program for local schools. They wanted to bring students closer to the lake's ecosystem through field trips, hands-on activities, and lessons about environmental responsibility. Mark volunteered to coordinate with teachers and environmental educators, excited by the prospect of fostering a new generation of lake stewards. He believed that by connecting children to nature early, they would grow up with a stronger sense of care and respect for their surroundings. Meanwhile, Mark continued to invest in the land itself. He worked with experts to improve the shoreline habitat, planting more native species and installing signs that explained the importance of wetlands and wildlife corridors. He also explored ways to enhance accessibility, adding a wheelchair-friendly path and benches for those who wanted to enjoy the view quietly. Mark's vision was a space that welcomed everyone, regardless of age or ability. Throughout these efforts, Mark maintained open communication with the neighborhood association and advisory group. Together, they reviewed progress, discussed challenges, and celebrated successes. One evening, as Mark sat by the lake reflecting on how far things had come, Laura stopped by for a visit. She smiled as she looked out over the water. "You've really transformed this place," she said warmly. "It's amazing to see how a letter about fishing led to something so meaningful." Mark nodded, feeling a mix of pride and humility. "It's been a journey, one that's taught me a lot about community, responsibility, and the power of collaboration." Laura raised her cup. "Here's to many more years of making the lake a place where everyone feels connected." Mark clinked his cup with hers, feeling hopeful about the future as the sun dipped below the horizon. Casting golden hues across the water, Mark knew that the lake was more than just a body of water. It was a symbol of unity, care, and the enduring bonds that make a neighborhood a true home. Years had passed since Mark first received that unexpected letter. What had started as a personal challenge transformed into a journey that reshaped not just one man's connection to the lake, but the entire neighborhood's relationship with their shared natural treasure. Mark's lakeside property had become a vibrant hub of community life. The shoreline, once a simple stretch of land, now flourished with native plants and thriving wildlife. The fishing platforms and benches welcomed neighbors of all ages, fostering moments of quiet reflection and joyful connection. The annual Lake Festival had become a beloved tradition, drawing residents together in celebration of the place they all cared for. Children eagerly anticipated the event each year, their enthusiasm a reminder of how important it was to nurture the next generation of lake stewards. Mark often thought back to those early days, the surprise of the letter, frustration of restrictions, and the spark of an idea that changed everything. He felt grateful for the support of neighbors like Laura and the advisory group, whose shared commitment made the vision a reality. One crisp autumn afternoon, Mark stood by the water's edge, watching the golden leaves drift across the surface. A group of children played nearby, their laughter ringing through the air. Their parents chatted on nearby benches, sharing stories and plans for the future. Mark's phone buzzed. It was a message from the neighborhood association president, inviting him to speak at the community's annual meeting about the lake's progress and the future. As he prepared his remarks, Mark reflected on the themes that had guided him throughout: the journey, respect, collaboration, and care. He knew the lake was a gift, one that required ongoing attention and shared responsibility. At the meeting, Mark spoke with warmth and humility. He shared stories of the challenges and triumphs, highlighting the importance of open dialogue and community involvement. He emphasized that the lake's health depended on everyone's commitment, no matter how small. "Together, we've built something special," he said. "This lake isn't just water and land, it's a reflection of who we are as neighbors and stewards. Our care today will shape the experience of those who come after us." His words resonated deeply with the audience. Many stood to applaud, inspired by the journey and eager to continue the work. After the meeting, neighbors approached Mark with ideas and offers to help. The advisory group welcomed new members, including young adults and families excited to contribute their energy and perspectives. Mark felt hopeful. The future of the lake was in good hands, nurtured by a community that valued connection and responsibility. In the months that followed, plans took shape for new initiatives: habitat, restoration projects, educational programs, and expanded accessibility efforts. Mark worked alongside neighbors, sharing knowledge and learning from others. One day, as Mark walked along the shoreline, a young girl approached with a small notebook in hand. She introduced herself as Mia, a local student interested in environmental science. "I've been watching the lake grow," Mia said, eyes bright with curiosity. "I want to learn how to help keep it healthy, just like you and your neighbors." Mark smiled, seeing in her the same spark that had inspired him years ago. "That's wonderful, Mia," he replied. "The lake is always teaching us. If you're willing, I'd love to show you around and share what I've learned." As they walked together, Mark felt the steady rhythm of the lake, the timeless ebb and flow of nature. Shaped by human care and respect, the legacy of the lake was no longer his alone. It belonged to the neighborhood, to the children who played along its shores, to the families who found peace in its beauty, and to every person who understood that stewardship is an ongoing gift. Mark looked out over the shimmering water, heart full. The lake was alive not just with fish and birds, but with the spirit of community and shared hope, and that was the greatest catch of all.